Okay.
We're in the middle of a roll call, so Brian. He's on there.
Brian Carroll, can you hear us?
I think he's trying to talk to us.
We can't hear you.
He's muting and unmuting. There we
There we
go.
go. No, we can't
hear you.
We can see you.
Downtown East Texas.
He's right side up. That's
But he's here. Go ahead.
Mike. Dave.
Hold on, Mike. Mike Morgan is. We didn't get any messages about whether or not he's going to be here or not, and I don't think he's on the call. So.
Keisha.
Yes, ma'am.
Lee.
Here.
Right.
All right, so we're the only one person we're meeting, missing is Mike Morgan.
Yes.
We're gonna fix that we can't hear him.
I think he's trying to. Brian, are you trying to fix your sound? Okay.
All right. So, some discussion and possible action on excusing Mike Morgan. No? The Hawaiian search guy says no.
He may be, I mean, I haven't heard from him,
We'll
but
just
he's
see if he chimes in.
Yeah. Okay.
a lot of traffic on Brownsville.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. Agenda item number 3, housekeeping, Vanessa.
Okay, hello, everybody. So we have a virtual component to this meeting, which everyone's pretty familiar with, but just as a reminder, if you are a member of the committee, we do ask that you try and be on camera. Please, if you are appearing virtually, to mute when you are not speaking. It just really helps in terms of background noise, so just to stay muted. You'll have on your screen, either at the bottom or for some reason mine is at the top, a little smiley face with a hand that looks like this. And you can use that to raise your hand. Don't forget to unraise your hand. I think now it gives you a reminder. But everybody forgets, so don't worry about that. And we'll try and keep an eye on that. But if you're a member, just feel free to speak up. I think, Brian, are you our only member that's on there? I don't worry about you not feeling free to speak up, so. And then in terms of sound, everything works pretty well. Like this picks it up pretty well, but maybe a little projection helps.
Especially on that end.
Yeah, the further away you are, the better.
Do your best thespian impression, Sean.
What's that?
Your best actor, project.
Okay.
All right, sounds good. All right, remarks from chair. So I attended the full commissioners meeting in May, I believe it was. We had a little bit of feedback from Commissioner Lerner. She just had some concerns, and I passed that on to SOP committee and stuff. I'm not sure too much how much we can address this, but she had received numerous reports recently, inspection reports that just had tons of photographs in there, which made it confusing, and she just found like it was difficult for them to understand what needed to be fixed and what didn't. And her comments were, as the inspection industry got to the point where we're just writing everything up to CYA, where they're calling in professionals for everything on the back end. So everything we check, we're recommending qualified tradesmen come in and look at, because we're worried about litigation or some other problems with it. So I got the report from her. I looked at it. It does have a ton of photographs, which I think, kind of my comments back initially to her were, I think a lot of people are doing the handheld devices where they're taking just tons of pictures and just dropping them in the report. So we looked at some of that, and I don't know how we can address some of that with SOP other than just education. We'll go with that. And then I know everybody on the committee got an email from an inspector about some DI, do-it-yourself inspections. I forwarded that on to enforcement. The only thing I had a question about was on Vanessa was when that email went out, we all started communicating about that. Is there any kind of violation there of,
Is this like the walk and talk?
I actually have I don't know that I was included on these.
So, no, what it was, they
Two
communicated,
different things.
so,
Okay.
yeah, so there was an email that was sent to the committee about this, what they're calling a do-it-yourself inspection. It's a way where you can pay and they'll kind of give you a template and tell you how to do your personal, of your property, do an inspection of your property, like a
Okay.
pre-inspection kind
Sure.
of thing. What Sean's asking about is about whether there's a walk and quorum concern if they're replying all when they
Yes,
get in
right.
a meeting like that. And I thought,
That's a
I
great,
think
yes.
it might be worth just mentioning or talking about that just very briefly about what the open meetings,
Caught up, sorry, I did not know that was coming. Right, so when the whole group gets something like that, the best thing you can do is pass it along to us and not reply all, not even reply individually, because it's enough people reply individually and we're stating opinions and we're, they're circulating it, you're trying to get into some open meetings issues. So I really think the best thing that you can do is, which it sounds like you did, pass those along our way. And to the extent it's something that, we wanna put on the agenda, or if the chair wants to provide a response, we can coordinate that so that there's not, an inadvertent quorum, right?
okay. So those are the only two things. I mean, I think we can put that on agendas for future consideration, but I just go for the two items on it. All right, so item number 5, ratification of minutes. Everybody have time to review those, have any corrections? Motion to accept the minutes. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Can you repeat who made the motion in a second?
We made the motion. Steve
I
went on
second, Steve second.
All right, general comments from visitors or written comments on non-agenda items.
did you receive any?
I didn't receive any.
Okay, well, there's some comments in the,
Got material
material.
comments. Yeah, but we don't have anyone who signed up.
Okay.
I mean, share those.
Yeah, the walk and talk.
Right, that's the first one. Sure we can. We'll go ahead and put it up. Amber's gonna share screen.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry.
they're not agenda items.
Oh, they are?
If they're not agenda items.
I'm sorry,
Oh,
is that
okay.
not what we're on right
Yeah,
now?
we're on the
Yeah.
comments.
Oh, okay.
Number 6, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm with you. This is me.
So I guess we had comments from, somebody sent an email in about the walk and talks, getting clarifications on that. And
So, yeah,
any
again,
comments?
these are items that aren't on the agenda for the inspector committee to make recommendations on today, but if this is something that you want the inspector committee to weigh in on, this particular comment and look at, I mean, this was based on some information that you provided to staff that we then put on the website.
Yeah.
And he had some issues with the way, as he says, he thought it was misleading or misrepresentation. If you, as a committee, want to have further discussion, we can put this on the October agenda. That's why it's on here, just to determine whether or not you want to move forward with it in the future or not, if you have any.
It is, I
Okay.
agree, it needs to be put to bed.
I mean, I think it's pretty clear in the rules, if it's a real estate transaction, but apparently it's not as clear as it may. So we'll add that for agenda item on the next meeting. to
Yeah.
discuss.
One of the things we were going to do is do a sort of a social media blast on this, but we can hold off on that. It was gonna be based on this response, but not the comment, but based on what we put on the on the website. And we can hold off on that till you guys determine what you want to, like, how to address this particular issue.
Have y'all been getting a lot of feedback from the Becker community, not understanding?
Not from the post on the website, but I hear about these walk and talks all the time, and I still get asked to do them. Well, so-and-so is doing it.
Yeah.
So they're still doing it.
All right, we'll put it on the October agenda and we'll hold off on it.
It's not as bad now because the market's kind of calmed down.
Right.
As to, before when we were having people just bypassing their option period and that type of stuff, it was a lot more. So it's tailing off, but obviously people still think that's appropriate.
Yeah. I don't hear a whole lot about it, but we can definitely take it up and see if there's anything else to clarify. All right, and then the other is the garage door opener. So Tony, on this one, we could consider this as a rule amendment if the committee felt so?
So what it would be is, we're calling it a petition for rulemaking, so if this is, in taking a look at this, if this is something that this committee would like to take up, we'll put it on the agenda. If there's interest here, right, we put it on the agenda for the next time, we'll bring the rule, take a look at it, look at those comments, see if there's something.
Maybe something for SOP to look at.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it would go through the SOP committee, but I guess what Vanessa's asking is, since this is a petition for rulemaking, does the committee want to go through that process, or does it comment something that the committee feels doesn't need to address at this time?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think when we talked about it a lot during the review we had last year, I'm not sure.
Nothing really added was the relief, checking the core to make sure it actually worked.
I'm not sure. I mean, does anybody on the committee feel strongly that we need to modify the SOPs to make it more clear or make it more?
I think it's been clear for many years.
I think so. I mean, there was, years ago, we had so much detail in the SOPs.
Yeah.
And Brian and I went over them about 10 years ago. We removed a lot of.
Yeah.
I mean, the list for like dishwasher was that long.
Right.
And they just said, then we changed it, just deficiency things that don't work. Rather than trying to detail it, because the belief was, we had like 10 things for one of those items that if it wasn't there, then it must not be something we need to look at.
Well, I think that's what we declined to take up,
Yeah.
coming up with a full list of tools when we did the SOP review, because the inspectors are trained and educated,
Yeah.
they can make their own decision on tools, how they're gonna test device items and stuff.
Yeah, but on the individual appliances, like the items that are in there, the list used to be huge. We opted, because people think that if it's not on the list, you don't have to do it.
Well, if they look at the condition of the door and feel it's unsafe to test the auto reverse mechanism,
Right.
they can put that's a departure
Right.
provision, they put that in their report.
I think guys that don't do it because there's a car underneath it.
Yeah,
So
I do it all the time.
so it sounds like there's not consensus on needing to address this or look at this any closer.
Okay, so we will not put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
All right. That was the only two items we had, right? Okay. All right, item number 6, general comments from visitors. Oh, just did that. All right, report from subcommittees, education committee.
So we met last week, there's a few things in some more non-substantive changes to be made in the rules that we're looking at, that we'll bring back at our next meeting. And then we were starting to look at getting the legal SOP class ready. So we're taking requests to be subject matter experts for that. I think that started, I think you sent one, I sent one. We're trying to get that ball rolling for that one too. I think that's pretty much it that we had back. Being those two bigger things. There's one other little one, but
Okay. Any questions? All right. Scott, standard practice.
we've met a couple times, we're actually talking about, number 10, about check boxes. And we did ask to get some information from the commissioner, if we get anything from her. Did she ever respond to the email? The commissioner learned, some reports were read.
Yeah, that's what Sean was talking about. So that's something
Yeah.
you guys are gonna address. If you recall, there were a bunch of, we had a quick meeting.
Right, yeah.
Addressed some issues so we could put them on the agenda today, but there were other things that are kind of a little longer process that you're
Yes.
gonna take up at the next meeting.
So we have another one, we're gonna schedule another one soon, but we're gonna talk about that item.
All right. All right. Item number 8, staff reports, executive division.
That would be me, so sorry. It's like I'm doing two things at once. Only a few things. Most related to this committee is that we received, as of midday Friday, so we could have received a few more, 144 responses to our survey, monkey survey, asking for submissions for public members of the committee.
Okay.
I don't expect that we have 144 viable candidates. I think we just had 144 surveys. We'll see what that looks like. But it closed on Friday, so we'll go through the process of selecting a public member. Other than that, that's the only thing related to inspectors specifically. I wanted you to know two things, one that has just been done and one that will be ongoing for about the next 18 months, I would say. First, license holder disciplinary history has always been available online, but it's hard to find. And so we have made it easier to find by plugging in a license holder in the license holder search on the front page of our website. There will be a button once you get to that page that says disciplinary history that gets you to that history. So just wanted you to know that makes it easier to find that history. It goes back 10 years, which is all we keep on the website. Secondly, our RAMP project, which is our new regulatory database and kind of the machine that keeps us running from an IT perspective. We're in the process of negotiating a contract to replace that system. We will begin implementing it in the new fiscal year, likely in September after we complete that contract. I wanted y'all to know of that because as we begin that implementation process, we will likely stop making any improvements to our old database, which is old and pretty clunky and severely limiting in terms of what we can do. But then once the new system is implemented, I think you can expect some leaps forward in terms of simplicity, access and self-service to items on our website, being able to do a lot without having to call us in your own time as a license holder. So we're really looking forward to what that new system has to offer, but we'll be in a transition over about the next 18 months. Anything for me?
When do we start advertising the openings for the 2 inspector slots on this board next year?
Are those, when do they come due?
Next December.
Yeah, December, yeah.
Next December.
Over the course of the fall, probably.
This year.
It's this.
I think.
Yeah, it's this year.
I thought we just had the public member.
Beginning of the odd year is when the two inspectors fall off every 2 years.
We'll look at it. We were just showing a public member for this cycle.
We should still have 2 inspector members going on. Since we're on, what, 6
Are
years?
you off or are you on, Lee?
No, I still have 2 more.
Okay.
So, but there's,
I'm waiting to see if people are like, oh no, yay.
I think Steve wearing the party shirt.
Steve apparently is moving in that direction.
But yeah, we have, because we have 6 inspector members, they're on staggering terms.
Somebody is with me.
Yeah, there's two people that drop off at the end of the year.
Steve and me, I just pulled it up.
For their term, I mean, if they're up for renewal, but you're turned out, right? This is the end of your second term.
We show a public member terming out at the end of December 2022. There are 4 members terming out in 2020, actually 5, in December 2023. Let's see.
That's not.
Myself, Stephen,
Yeah.
If I may, so we can certainly look into it, but I think what we had to do to adjust to the rule change that was implemented maybe a couple years ago, we had to tweak a little bit of the terms to get it onto the new schedule. So that may be why it doesn't align with the rule language right now, but it will in the future.
Because, yeah, the way it was originally set up, it was supposed to be 6 inspectors, 3 public. The inspectors
Yeah.
were 2, 2, and 2.
And because there
So
was
you didn't
that,
have 4 inspectors going on all on one
Yeah, but
yeah, but
time.
because there was that transition where the term ended, I think, if I recall, like something in January, and then we switched to December 31st as the term ending, we had to do some adjustments to get everything lined up.
Next year.
2 inspectors next year, 2 public members.
Is it the end of 23?
December 23rd.
Okay.
This happened at 9/11 too, involuntary extension.
Yeah.
In the Army, I said, you can't leave.
So you thought you only had 6 months left.
18
So,
months.
Steve and Sean were appointed Steve was, you were reappointed in 2017. So 6 years would put you at 2023.
He said, right here. Oh, I'm thinking,
The
I guess we
beginning
were
of
thinking the
23.
beginning
Did
of
you count
23.
17?
Because he's in 17.
17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22.
Anyway, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time,
Yeah.
but if y'all can look at that, because
That'd be a
I think those
7-year
are.
appointment.
Right, I mean, we've got a matrix, we'll double
Yeah.
check it, but we worked
I
pretty.
thought it used to say 22 for me. I thought somebody went and played with it.
Oh, well, look at me.
I got 10 shirts.
All right, well, we'll figure out who's going off when and if we need to start.
Okay.
I think we've got it, but we will double check it.
Okay,
I feel confident though, because we sat down and really went through because of that rule change.
okay,
It kind of flipped everything a little bit, but we will take a look and make sure.
all right. Enforcement,
Tony Renteria, staff attorney and liaison for the inspector committee. Mike's not in today, he is off. Since the last meeting, we have had 8 orders that are on the reports, and I'm currently able to answer any questions that you might have about any of these orders.
Tony, the one for 5/26/2022, and regarding the shower pan, this is actually coming from inspectors. Ms. Neal has actually posted all over social media, since Lee and I have had numerous calls on this, that she was supposed to be fined, that Nick D'Amico sent in a letter to her that she's no longer having to be fined, she has to do the 10 hours. And then she's actually on her social media
Posting,
posting and bad-mouthing TREIC and the homeowner that filed on her, and so the inspectors are actually calling Lee and I both, and I have some of it, and I'm over here going, so the question everybody's asking is, how did she get out of her fine?
yeah, I did notice this order did not have,
And it doesn't have a
A
business name on
penalty.
it, and she was a subcontractor for a guy that actually paid the insurance.
yeah, I think what happened in this order, this is, John is our attorney on this case,
Okay.
but the orders are reviewed by the supervisor and by the director.
Yes.
I think in this particular case, we looked at the facts of the case, and we take into consideration factors of mitigation. I think in this case, we did consider that she did make efforts to mitigate the damage, and in fact, that there had been restitution made for the damage. So that was the rationale. Now, this is on a case-by-case basis. It doesn't always work out automatically like that. Typically, you're correct, a fine or a penalty accompany disciplinary. So that's the rationale.
Okay, it's just what she's posting out there and what's coming across. We've actually had multiple people calling us going, how is this possible? And I know we're all subject to look at everything, but what she's saying on Facebook and Instagram and stuff about organizations and people is just made the whole industry ask a lot of questions.
That freedom of speech thing is real.
Yeah, no, I get that, yeah, but.
I think probably the proper response to that is just this idea that each case is looked at individually, and there are factors that play into the discipline that's applied that are not in the order. And just with Tony kind of giving you the additional details that she made efforts to make it right, those are just things that go towards how to weigh the punishment. And so, you know, you can say, I've asked, and here's why that happened. And yeah, I don't like what she's saying on social media.
That's just wanted to, because we're being asked by inspectors and that's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, we did also include in the order, some of those factors of mitigation, so they are listed there. The other reason is, that she had no prior history of complaints, and she'd been licensed since 2017.
If ever you get those type of questions and you want more immediate feedback, we say the same thing with commissioners. Just send that order back to us and say, give me some explanation. What are the details?
Yeah, it just popped up in the past couple of days because everybody knows the meeting's coming up. It was a question. I was like,
It's like, what's the rest of the story?
I just asked.
All hard.
So, yeah.
If I'm this, so she's had nothing, correct?
She basically
Flooded a house.
Flooded a shower,
Yeah.
you know, made a mistake, completely admitted, hey, that was on me, and she took care of it and whatnot. And they filed a complaint. She got disciplinary action against her, but she started just blasting all over social media. You know, I don't have to pay a fine, Nick's gonna pay my fine for me. Oh, and he sent a letter saying I don't have to pay a fine. She's basically telling everybody, if you get on his sign, he'll make sure you never have to pay a fine, you know, for TREIC, no matter what you do type of thing. It's really what was kind of
taking care of my hours requirements.
Yeah.
And so everybody's like, well, what is this letter that he did that made TREIC change their mind? And I'm over here going, I'll ask.
Right.
So
It's
many
not
questions.
unusual to, your
letter.
penalty
Yeah.
is to take more training in something.
Yeah.
That's,
It isn't aware of it.
It just kind of.
I train my people.
So we did get a letter from him, but that really
Blood
wasn't a
test
determining
on
factor.
Falcon Show.
I heard that.
What's that?
Yeah,
They did get a letter, but it didn't correlate for her.
Okay.
We did get a letter from, Nick from Internachi, but
Yeah.
that really wasn't the determining factor, it was more of what Tony said, the effort she made to mitigate.
Right,
Okay.
okay, good.
That was just where this all stemmed from. It's just a bunch of posts from her bragging about it, so. That's really all it was.
Vanessa?
And I'll just go back to Lee's point of the prior, it's the rule is, the terms of the two inspector members expire on December 31st of each odd numbered year.
I thought they started.
They expire, so there was a change a few years ago, and it really like rocked everyone's world. In terms of like getting everybody, because some people were on the old terms and the new, but we're good, so we have you for another year.
So we do get forced extensions, is the answer.
No, it's what you signed up for, it's what you signed up for.
Feel like you're in the military again.
There was an active process, no, but just so everyone's clear, it's just that one public member,
I
this
didn't get
term.
a enlistment contract card. I guarantee.
We are considering changing the rule again close to the next
Yeah,
December to
that's a good
further extend it.
We should put that on the agenda.
We'll let you know then. I'm kidding.
I think it's a
That's
good
not true.
idea. All right. Education examination? Jennifer?
Sure. Some new reports for you guys. The first report, if you can see it on your screen, is just overall fiscal year to date information. If you look, there are two boxes. The bottom third of each box is inspector courses. This first page is qualifying courses. You see we had some early on, but not really any in the last several months. And that's due to just the big overhaul of the education pre-licensing coursework. Everybody really did their due diligence and submitted all of the coursework that aligns with the new requirements. So those all have 4-year approvals now. So the top area is applications received. The bottom area of this page is applications approved. And then the next page is the same information, but for continuing education. And so kind of the same thing, the bottom third area of each of the boxes relates to inspector continuing education. You can see March, April, May, we've seen kind of a jump in ICE courses submitted. Similarly at the bottom, approved. We approved 43 inspector CE courses in May. And the next reports are the ones that are kind of new for you all. This is overall, inspector, real estate, combined. So there are 4 graphs here. First in blue is total of qualifying education providers. So this graph goes for each application type back for 5 years plus fiscal year to date, or 4 years plus fiscal year to date this year. And so, like I said, in the blue, qualifying education providers. In the gray to the right is continuing education providers. So right now we're at 187 as of May of this year. And then down below that, qualifying courses approved. This is a culmination of both real estate and inspector, and then same to the right of that, continuing education courses. So we're at 1,918 so far in continuing education courses approved. Highest peak we've had in this report was in 2019, 2,591 approved. I imagine we'll probably be somewhere around the 2,300 mark when we end this fiscal year. This report, Amber, this is the next one is the one that I sent you an email and asked if you could replace. The report in the materials is inaccurate regarding the inspector continuing education courses. We just had a bit of a hiccup on the formula in May, June, July, and August of 2021 information. So the information that Amber is sharing now is what is accurate. And this is a 13-month comparison. And you can see, again, bottom third of the first box, bottom third of the second box is where we track all of our inspector education information. Any questions so far? Okay. And we've got the graph at the bottom that I think is helpful. The last report is just an all over year-over-year comparison, going back to fiscal year 2018. And this is a combination of all volume of applications, all types of applications approved. So you'll see at this fiscal year, we're at 2284 so far with about 4 months remaining, 3 months remaining. That is all of the actual education report information, but I have a couple of other things that I want to share with you. One, to piggyback off of Lee's report, the inspector SOP legal ethics update course, we do need to start getting organized for writing that. At the inspector education committee, we discussed it. We've received 4 or 5 volunteers as a result of that meeting to participate in writing the course, but I wanted to make sure and make that information available to this committee for anybody who might be interested in participating in that group. As a reminder, it's not just determining what content or what topics are appropriate, but we actually do writing. You do content writing for this book. And I think that, you know, we really had a solid effort at the last go around. So I don't know that we'll need to do as heavy a lift as we did last time. Certainly regarding forms and some recent rule changes, we'll need to add that information in and then maybe tweak as the industry has, you know, responded in the last couple of years to some of the other areas in the book. I'd also like to, in the current broker responsibility book that we're writing, we've added a lot of really helpful instructor tools. And I get a lot of feedback about the inspector course that some of those things might be really helpful. So, you know, kind of with each non-elective book that we develop, we're going, you know, we're digging further and further in and creating more and more ways to interact and engage with the students. So I want that to be a focus of this book too. So just putting that out there, if you are interested, email general counsel. with your, just a little bit about yourself, how long you've been licensed, any education initiatives that you've been a part of, and why you're interested. So that would be, we look forward to that. We want to start working toward the first meeting of that group. Second thing I want to tell you all is that August 1st is the last day that anybody can complete a virtual practicum. I think a lot of our education providers and instructors have shifted back to in-person anyway, but we did send a communication out to our education providers. We also put that information in the inspector insight so that anybody who is an instructor of that outside of an education provider would be aware. So they were given ample notice, and August 1st is the last day. So I know that's something this committee has been interested in. So that is done. Let's see, I feel like I had one more thing. Does anybody have any questions on that?
I do.
Okay.
So just
State your name for the record.
Scott Newcomer, ETI, Home Inspector Training. As we discussed last time with the, called the challenge, the unintended consequences of having an approval through 2025 to do our practicum because it's approved as a classroom. I had, my understanding was that we were going to look through this and have a discussion because we do have a TREIC approval as a classroom for our 40-hour practicum. So I think that I still think there's an unintended consequence there that needs to be dealt with because of the approval that we have to be able to do that. So,
Are you talking doing the home inspection in your classroom?
no, the 40-hour practicum. Our 40-hour practicum is approved as a classroom. And as we discussed last time, and the attorney, I don't know if they're here this time or they're on Zoom again, that we had that unintended consequences that we actually had. If it was approved as a classroom, it was approved and you could deliver it that way. And we were approved through 2025. So I'm just curious because there's others that were approved as well as a classroom, not just my company, but others that have that approval as a classroom to deliver it. And according to the rules, if you have a classroom approval, you can deliver it through technology.
And so I'm not sure if you received my response on that, but the practicum is specifically carved out in the rules. So the TREIC interpretation of that has been that portion, the practicum portion, the actual in-person component is an in-person component. I think we did address that, that, what did it say? The rule addresses a practicum specifically calls it out as 5 complete and in-person inspections. So that component, we're as a licensing agency, we've gone through our rules, we looked at those comments, we really see that as a carve out. We saw the same feedback in terms of that interpretation from the governor's office when we did the rule change, the recent inspector education overhaul, and we're pretty confident. That classroom delivery approval does not indicate an extension of that. And Jennifer, you can speak to it a little bit more clearly than I can.
Sure, and I will just acknowledge that I think in most cases, my staff looks at, it's a default to have a delivery method. I think the corrective action that my team can take is to reissue approval letters for the Texas practicum without a delivery method. Because it does not require a delivery method. Like Vanessa is saying, it is what it is defined in the rule and authorized by the statute to be in-field training. So basically I can apologize and say it was an oversight to include a delivery method on the approval letter for the practicum, and I can take corrective action on that.
And I think if the discussion, if you want to take the discussion in the form of, and I mentioned this, of a virtual practicum component, I think that's a different conversation. But in terms of what the rules say, we're not seeing the discrepancy. I think Jennifer can make that correction if that would help, but the rules themselves and the statute, they really provide for that in-person component as it relates to the practicum. if the conversation is something that's more, and I think this is what I understood, that to advocate for a virtual practicum, I think that's a different conversation. That's something that if this group is interested in, if you wanted to speak to that, maybe that's something that goes on in a future agenda item. I don't know, that's not my, that I think is a different conversation. As far as where the rules are, I think our interpretation, we've looked at it, we took a look, I think we've got it in terms of that being an in-person component.
Yeah, okay, just, that's not kind of what was said last time, so it's just, something I thought that we had to go through a different process to get there, and so it's, I know that this group is not interested in that, so that's, we could talk about that until we go in the face, so. All right, well, we'll proceed as we need to.
That concludes my report.
All right. Any questions for Jennifer? Comments? All right. Licensing Division, Denise?
Good morning, everyone. Denise Sample, Licensing Director. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but I'm joining you remotely, and like to draw your attention to the first page of my reports. And these are also a newer format. More of the information is presented graphically instead of just a large sheet of numbers. So on this page that Amber has displayed, the bottom left corner has the applications received, and this is a fiscal year-to-date comparison for inspector applications. I do want to point out that while it looks like we have a decrease compared to last fiscal year, we do, but as a reminder, fiscal year 21 is when we had the record number of professional inspector applications come through as people were applying ahead of the requirements changing on July 30th of last year. So for reference, the number of professional inspectors we'd received as of this point in fiscal year 20 was 139 fewer than we have now. So, just 418 for the same reporting period for fiscal year 20, and we're at 557 in this fiscal year. So we're still up from 2 years ago when we didn't have the record number of applications. We'll continue monitoring that, but that's kind of what we expected, and that's typical to requirements changing, as you see a big push and a huge increase in applications ahead of the requirements changing. But like I said, we'll continue monitoring those numbers through the rest of the fiscal year. The next page is renewal activity, and so I'll point you over to the right-hand side, and that shows the inspector renewal activity fiscal year-to-date comparison. What we're doing here is comparing the current fiscal year 22 to 2 years ago, fiscal year 2020. So as you are aware, licenses renew on a 2-year cycle, and so this would be comparing the same, essentially the same license group, license holder population. So those numbers for professional inspectors, those are the larger numbers. Real estate inspectors, that's our smallest license holder population. Apprentice renewal rates are not usually high. People don't usually hold on to an apprentice inspector license for very long, which is why our professional inspector numbers are the largest of the license holder count. So the next page shows the total license holder counts. This is a 13-month comparison. And you'll see inspectors, this is a combination of all the ranks and active and inactive statuses combined. So we are up. We're following the similar trend to the overall license holder count. The next page shows a breakdown of the inspector license holder counts, and this is the 13-month comparison in a graphical form. The next page shows the application processing time, and this is a 13-month comparison. If you'll hone in on the center of each of those graphs, you've got the inspector numbers broken out. We are within our goal of 14 calendar days to process. As of last Friday, we're essentially processing those inspector applications as they come in. It's at most two business day turnaround to get a first response from my team on an inspector application. And for reference, at the bottom of this page, you'll just see a count of how many applications came in. As a reminder, though, depending on when we get supporting documents for an application, those numbers of how many we get each month those don't necessarily represent the ones that we've processed, because we respond to documents being submitted for an application. And if there are no questions, that concludes my report.
I have a question, Denise. On the license holder count, why did we compress that report instead of breaking down the corporate, the business entity licenses and the inactive licenses and that type of stuff?
It was just to simplify it and show it in a more graphical presentation, to not have, if you recall, the old report format was just an entire 8.5 by 11 page of just numbers. So it just condensed the statuses.
I don't know, I kind of felt like it was a more true representation of what the numbers actually are when you can take out the inactive ones. To people that are actually, doing real estate or inspections or easement right away, because those are pretty high numbers of inactive licenses, so.
Generally, that's a very valid point, but anyone can go from active to inactive and back at any point during the license term, and they're still current. So I know whenever we're asked to provide, total license holder counts, we usually include active and inactive, but I can definitely, if the committee would like, can figure out a way to provide that at the inspector committee meetings, kind of that breakdown.
I just always liked it because I knew who was actually practicing versus who was
Gotcha.
theory just licensed.
Okay, yeah, that's something I can look into. Maybe squeezing that in or providing a supplemental report if that's what the committee would like to see.
Thank you.
Sure.
Morning, Quadrennial Champions Google Real Estate. As far as the applications are concerned, is there ever a time in the future where inspectors will be able to process their application, get it processed online?
We are currently, oh, sorry, Roy, I did not mean to cut you off. We are currently working on that. There's some testing involved. We have to make sure that, all the logic is there, that we don't have someone who currently holds a different type of license. They're able to submit a new application for the same license. So there's a lot of that kind of testing involved, but that is on our current list of projects with our IT department right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, we will definitely put out some notifications once that's live.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Denise.
Thank you.
All right, item number 9, discussion and possible action regarding 22535-222 Tony inspection reports.
Yeah, so this is the rule that was before you guys last, when was the last meeting? April, I believe?
Yeah.
And staff had brought forward a recommendation that committee member Brian Carroll wanted to provide some tweaks for, and that his draft was submitted to you guys, I believe, Thursday as a supplement. So it's on the table to discuss which of these you would like to move forward to, if either, and if there's any other additional changes you want to make for the move forward to the commission. This is essentially addressing, just for as a refresher, the issue with making sure that inspectors are, so we amended this rules, about a year ago, to make sure that inspectors were getting paid, and that when they get paid, that they have a requirement to submit a report 2 days.
It was from 3 down to 2 with the payment component being.
And so this is to make sure that if they're dealing with if it's scheduled at a certain time and they're paid, that there's not some obligation that an inspector provide a report when they actually have not done an inspection yet because it's scheduled in advance. So with all that out there, you have before you 2 different versions of the rule. Again, neither one of these have to be the final version if there's some other changes you want to make, but the one before you on the screen is the one that was proposed at the April meeting, and then you want to bring up.
Yeah, I have to stop.
Oh, okay. You want me to bring it up?
No, I can bring it up.
Okay.
I was just saying I can't have them at the same time.
Okay.
I think the second one she's bringing up has the word business days in there and
in full number 2.
Right. So Brian, do you want to speak to your amendment, your proposed amendment?
Sure. When I looked through the rules, and it may be somewhere, I couldn't find a definition of days. And so I put business days because my concern was that someone pays an inspector on Friday afternoon at 4:59 p.m., by credit card, and then goes, I want my report in 2 days. Well, that would be Sunday. And then that was the edit at 1, and the reason for that, and at 2 was it says payment, but I want to make sure it was payment in full, because I don't want someone arguing, well, I made you a partial payment for your inspection, therefore you need to give me the report, because that's not really what our intention is. It's to get you guys paid in full. So that was the 2 edits I had proposed into the rule language.
I like the in full.
Yeah, I like the in full. I don't like the business, because my problem with the business days is that option period isn't business days.
Right.
Option period is calendar days, and that's where a lot of this is very time sensitive
Well,
to
and
that.
whose business?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, go ahead, I'm
I
sorry.
was gonna say, for inspectors, for a lot of inspectors, especially the younger ones, every day is a business day.
It's 8 to 8, Monday through Sunday.
I mean, I see it. I personally, we inspect 6 days a week, but like you said, everything else is, the contracts, I always love the 2-day contracts on 4th of July evening. And they're looking for somebody. It happens. There is no holiday in the contracts, as far as I know, on the agent side. It's all day.
So can we all agree that the one we get on Thursday minus the business days, but paid in full?
I like the paid in full. I mean, when we initially talked about it, because we've been prepaying for almost 20 years, and I brought up the fact of 2 days after payment, my payments sometimes are 2 weeks before the inspection. And I remember the comment was, you obviously can't do it before the inspection. But then the question is, if it's prepaid, once you do the inspection, do you have 2 days?
I think this addresses both of them.
So I think this clears a lot of it. I think a combination of the two, of paid in full, okay, not a problem. I don't think I've ever had a partial payment, but I'm sure that can happen.
Yeah.
And then it's either delivered, like it says, within 2 days of either payment or the inspection, whichever, like you say, that comes first.
It doesn't mandate it though. It's not.
I think the payment in full is a good catch, because that can happen. I've had somebody who, one person's paying half, the other person's paying the other half. I've had that before, so.
Is there a question on the 2 days when that starts? If you do an inspection in the evening, you finish at 8 o'clock that evening?
It's just,
is that the first day?
It's just like the option period in the contract. When you complete it, when you execute the contract, when you do the inspection, that's day 0.
48 hours from then. 0.
Tomorrow is day 1, the next day is day 2.
I don't know if that's clear with inspectors, but that's easily
Well, we
taken
can-
care of
what-
in a commentary.
If this rule is moved forward to the commission adopts it, we will obviously have an explanation about what the rule means.
I mean, that's a good explanation and probably known by agents. Day 0 versus the inspectors. I haven't heard of that. But that is a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, we can communicate that.
Yeah.
That could be an advisor type thing.
Summer's listening right now.
Yeah.
Well, and then if people don't want to work on the weekends and they need therefore more than 2 days, you just specify in writing.
Yeah, right, an agreement.
They could say business days in their contract,
Right.
or Monday through Friday in their contract. If that's theirs, if they agree to it.
Do we want to add payment, how do we say it here, in full to number 1?
Just,
I think
would you say
both of them.
Receipt of full payment, you
Yes.
want to add full, or payment in full? We'll just track the same language.
Yeah.
All right, so staff understands, it's removing business, so keeping in calendar days, adding the payment in full to item, the sub 1, and keeping it at sub 2.
Yes.
You want to?
Yeah, so we need
Want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
That what Tony just said?
Yeah, what Tony just said.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion by Scott, seconded by Bruce.
Brian.
Brian. Sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
don't think Lee's opposed to reading that.
Somebody right there.
You voted president.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, good with that?
Any,
Any
no,
questions?
yeah. So
I think that's good.
we just didn't do the full,
Full.
did everybody vote?
Uh-huh.
Okay,
Everybody who was here voted.
okay,
Lee stepped out and.
okay. I'm just making sure we've got everybody accounted
Mike's
for.
not on.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
yay.
All right. Item number 10, possible action regarding class 35223, standard inspection report form. Johnny?
Yeah, so this is kind of a combination of two things. There was some concern about multiple checkboxes that was brought up at the last committee meeting, so we addressed that in here. And then also at the last committee meeting was the desire for an inspection report to be used at all times, regardless of whether you're doing a single inspection item or not. So this rule, can you scroll up a little bit, Amber? Has this language about the checkboxes. If multiple checkboxes are checked, and it says what the inspectors require, the inspector must also include an explanation as to the reason for checking multiple checkboxes in the applicable sections of the report form. So that's to address that multiple checkboxes. And then if you look down, all the language that's been struck is to require, so that there were to carve out for single items or single system or component inspections, that carve out is being deleted in its entirety. So any inspector doing an inspection, regardless of whether it's a single item or component or not, would be required to do it on the report form. There's been some discussion that was had at the SOP meeting as well as with the chair about TREIC staff bringing something to the full committee that at the next meeting that's sort of an instruction page that you can include, we'll put on the website if the committee wants to do this, that gives a little bit more detail as to how you should actually check the boxes and what's the requirement. So make sure you always check the deficient box if there is an actual deficiency, because I think Sean brought up that there's some people are writing it in the comments, but they're not actually checking the deficient box. So along that line, and also explaining how you would handle a single inspection, a single item inspection on the inspection report form, should you have to do one. So explain. So just a little bit more detail on a kind of an instruction to the inspection report form that would be something you can get on the website, because this is in rule. Not all inspectors know to go to the rule, and this explains how you're supposed to do the form. This would be more of a document you could just pull off the
Just a little cheat sheet.
We'll bring something to the full committee in October that for your review and approval, and if you want to go that route, we'll then put it on the website.
On MCE handbook. Continuing ed handbook. I mean, talking about adding that on the list of things.
Yeah, this would just be a standalone document that we could attach to the report form that we have on our website that you could download, but it'd also be a separate document for people who use,
Tell them how to fill it out.
Yeah, just explain.
Go to the education providers as well,
Yeah.
and get it out during when you're doing your SOP class is actually part of the
I mean, we do
SOP
see
class.
those of us that review a lot of reports. Yeah, and a lot of times it's just they forgot to check.
Yeah. But there's been several people disciplined
Yeah.
for not checking the boxes.
Or
But they
using
might
the
make
wrong
comments
form.
below, they just,
It's just report writing
yeah.
in general
Right.
is weak.
So we'll bring that forward to the committee for you to look at in October, but on this agenda item is whether or not you want to move forward with the changes that are in front of you, which is the language
changes-
about the checkboxes and then striking the language about the single component.
The checkboxes, yeah, I just want to say is striking out, we had a long conversation about it even in the SOP.
Yeah.
About, let's just make it simple, if you're doing a real estate transaction, use the 7-6 or whatever, or it's required. The single item, I know a lot of guys are getting away, well, during hailstorms, roofs and stuff, that means somebody's calling you separately, it's not a real estate transaction. That's where the miscommunication came from, by eliminating that and just saying, there's a real estate transaction involved, even if it's a sell by owner, use a 7-6.
When this came around, it was a group of a couple of guys, I think it was Carr, a few people that were mainly hitting up Chinese drywall.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And they wanted to be able to just do, one item. But I always thought it was strange. I always did the whole report and just, a lot of unexpected.
I think that's how we would explain it.
Because it has all the other things
Yeah.
that,
It has the information on the
preamble.
consumer.
Yeah, it has all, there was no reason, with software now, you can just, not inspect everything else.
Yeah. Brian?
Do you want to say something?
I'm good.
And the checkboxes, I don't know if we ever really prohibited. What confused things is our last handbook said you shouldn't do all four.
Well, where
You
it came
actually
down
can.
to is in the SOP, the new class that's out.
Yeah.
It says you can check up to 3 check boxes. And that made everybody go, why can't I check 4?
Yeah.
So it just came back around, that, it started from that, was where
The
this all
way,
came.
the way the report's put together, there are a lot of situations where you can check all 4.
Yeah, but that's.
But
Yeah,
explain it. Well, I mean, you get into bathroom fans and exhaust. Half of them are not present, half are present, half are defective, not inspected, easy to do all 4.
Yeah, I just never checked all 4 boxes. I just put in the explanation,
Yeah.
they're not present or whatever in the, it's deficient.
But I think this does a good job of clearing it. If they want to check all
If
4,
they want to do it, they
they
can.
just need to make a comment why all 4.
And I thought we always had, anytime other than just inspect it, it's an explanation, but this is clear.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, Roy.
I just got a quick question.
Can you stand up and identify yourself, please? Thank you.
Roy Carter, Director of Inspector Education with Champion School of Real Estate. If we're dealing with the single system item, shouldn't we also deal with 6D on the phased inspection? Because the same situation kind of applies. If the builder has you using a different report form, then you put that statement. If you're not going to utilize the TREIC report form.
So if you're doing a builder inspection, that's for the builder, that's
not a real estate inspection.
Yeah, it's not
For
for
a
a
real estate transaction.
Yeah, that was specifically, I don't think the notice was required for a phase inspection, right?
Well, not phased, I'm just saying, based on the language that you have on here, if you get down to the very end of it, right, if I'm doing it on capital build, I know the phase, stuff like that, I'm not required to use this report.
Right.
But the way that this is worded says that if I'm gonna utilize, the builder has you using a different form other than the REI 7-6, then you're required to put this statement on the cover sheet for that.
Right.
Are you working for the builder or you're working for the consumer?
No, so if you look at the rule, Roy, F is specific to single component inspections, and that's when the notice is required. It doesn't apply to anything else that notice doesn't apply to anything else under 6. It's specific to
What rule?
6.
What about 6D?
No, D also has to.
D has it, isn't it?
What, yeah, can you give us the one?
Oh, yeah, it's 535, 220, I'm sorry, 223.
So I think this is where we're.
Oh, I see, okay.
It says
60.
for builders.
Well, it also says may attach to this. First page of the report. So it's not required.
That's okay.
Put it on the footer of mine about 20 years ago.
So the inspector may attach, but it was on the first page of that paragraph way too long.
Yeah. I think D is way too long, it just needs to be cut down.
They're looking at 60.
223.
Amber's pulling it up on the screen, I believe. Can they go a little bit bigger?
Yeah, the last sentence of that paragraph makes it sound like it's optional.
Yeah, the inspector may attach a notice to the first page of the report at the time of the report prepared by the inspector, so.
Well, I thought it said you had to, and then it
Says
said you may.
Right.
But I thought may was like one of the places to put it.
Yeah, it says the first, it's supposed to be there, but in the bottom, if it isn't there, they may attach it.
So if they give you a pre-printed form and there's like no place to put it, you
can't.
attach.
Yeah.
I think,
Attach.
I think that should just be eliminated. I mean, they should just be, if you're doing quality control work for builders, or phasing for a city, you shouldn't have to make any kind of, I mean, you're working for the builder, there's no reason to
Well,
notify.
it's outside the scope also, because the home's
Right.
not finished.
Right.
Well, it's not
Well,
for-
it could
it's
be a
not for
final, it could be a
consumer.
final inspection, that you're working for the builder, doing a final quality control.
So,
You should
now
have
that,
to provide notice.
if I may, now that that's been brought up, I think it's probably not a good idea to take care of that at this meeting. We
Right.
probably need to look at it, and have a little bit more of
So
a
can we agree
discussion.
on what we have right now and then put that on future meeting to look at at the next meeting?
Or be better just to adopt it all at once, or,
I mean,
well, I know, but we can reconsider it. I mean, this
Well,
issue,
why don't we just do these, since we already have them here, and then we can revisit 60.
so we'll have to take, if we do it that way, do we take multiple rule changes to the commissioners, or will we bundle it all together?
well, I think that's what you're looking at right now, right?
So there's a
Do you
couple-
wanna move forward?
There's a couple options, you can, and correct me if I'm wrong, so you can move forward now, and, if this rule's open, then you have two options there. You can re-propose it, which will extend it another rule cycle, if in fact you guys decide you want to change that language. Or you can let this go through, and then once this is adopted, bring it up again and change it again at that point. Or wait and take care of it all at one time.
Yeah, I think it needs to be taken care of all at one time. I mean, it definitely doesn't need to be proposed and then we'll re-propose it again.
So essentially send it back for more consideration, no moving it forward at this meeting, right?
That's the way, that way we can go to next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been like this for many years, so.
Yeah.
3 more months is not gonna.
So what's the second thing you're thinking of doing is?
60,
Addressing
change that wording,
D, addressing 6D.
on whether it needs that actual statement or, on the front of a builder
So
report.
we're not having to provide notice, you're working for a builder, doing a final inspection.
I think because the thought process
Substantially
is,
complete.
I think the thought process is if you're doing that report for a builder, that if the builder gives it to a consumer. And I think that's why, I think that was probably put in there to make sure that notice is there. If the builder is taking that report from the inspector, giving it to the consumer, so that they know this isn't a full inspection, this is something different that was proposed by the builder.
I guess before we get too far down that road, we just send it back to the subcommittee.
Yeah.
Y'all look at 6D and bring it back some proposed changes, if any, for 6D.
Thanks, Roy.
So we need to take no action with that, we just move on to the.
We'll just note in the minutes that the committee directed staff to take it up again and bring it to the SOP subcommittee.
So, all right. Item number 11, discussion regarding possible receiving payment at closing for inspections. Vanessa and Tony?
Yeah, so this was Lee's issue that he brought up last time about the fact that there are some, I guess, some parts of the state where inspectors don't get paid until the closing. And the thing that, do you want to address? Okay, so I'm trying to remember what we talked about this morning.
If it's contingent, are you guaranteeing them a good report?
Well, that's
Right.
already against the rules.
Right.
You can't do that anyway.
But I think that was the topic, right? That's just
Yeah,
the
and
conversation.
the argument that some are giving, because there are some areas where this is becoming such the standard that if you're an inspector and you don't allow them to pay you at closing, they're just never gonna refer you on inspection again, and that's happening.
Agents.
Yeah, and that's happening a lot, and the catch I think that they're getting around on this is, well, just to say getting paid at closing doesn't mean it's contingent, you can still get paid for it, you can file a suit or whatnot and go against them, and I'm like, okay, but what inspector's gonna go through all that? And that's kind of my contention.
One of the, I guess one of the issues, Lee, is that we don't ever hear from any inspectors about this being an issue. I mean, we don't hear like that this is the.
I hear about it.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying that in terms of making a rule or doing something, you know, we don't have any sort of data to back up that this is a big issue. I'm not saying it's not, but we don't hear anything in the agency. It's already against the rules, it's against the law to have an inspection report being contingent on, you know, the outcome, or having the outcome being contingent on whether or not they're getting paid or not.
Right, that's what I'm saying, but that's exactly what I'm saying, is they're saying that this is a workaround for that rule to saying it's not actually, the closing is, they're saying it's not contingent. Even though we as inspectors would see it as being contingent, They're saying, well, it's not, just because even if it doesn't close, you can still get paid for it. You go after that client for the money. It's not contingent on the closing. You can still go after the client afterwards. So technically, it's not violating the rule, is the argument that's being given. And I addressed that, Avis and I dealt with this like 4 years ago, where she was actually going up to this area and specifically talked to them and had a huge discussion, because that was such a standard out there. Well, apparently that still hasn't changed. Now there's other parts of the state that I'm starting to get calls about. This is starting to happen too. So
It's coming back around.
Yeah.
That's our problem, is you got people from other states, and that's the way we do it no matter what, and then you start hearing more and more. And I would just say, I'm in the middle of this right now dealing with some realtors, and I've been waiting 3 months to get paid.
And I think there's a reluctance from inspectors to file complaints against realtors, because then it kind of puts them on blacklist.
It's actually, you actually are told, and this comes from inspectors where I now live as well, is if you don't do it, you're not gonna work. They'll put you on a list, and then they notify every realtor out there that you're not gonna comply. And when you show them that this is a law, they're like, my broker didn't tell me it, so I don't care. That's the wording that's coming from the realtors themselves.
Is it that new program that's being pushed out, the pay at closing, where?
Yes. You
But
pay everything at
But that's
closing.
guaranteed payment from the merchant.
That's from the merchant. That's something different. That's
That's the
something
only thing I
attacking
hear
onto
about.
that.
That's the only thing I hear
That's something
about.
attacking onto that. You gotta come.
I'm sorry.
Scott Newcomer, ATI, Home Inspector Training. I think the other thing to take into consideration is Guardian is out there. Yeah, so what's happening is actually the inspector get paid at the time.
Right.
So it's not the inspector of the report that's at issue here, because Guardian Financial is part of Porch.
Right.
They're actually paying the inspector when the inspection report's done, that day or the next day, and they guarantee it, and if it doesn't close and all those things, they take that responsibility off the inspector's shoulder.
Yep.
So it is something, I mean, just a point of information is really all this is something to consider here, because the inspector does get paid immediately.
In those situations.
In that particular
in that
situation, that's not all the
yes,
situations, but
right.
it is something that's going out there all over the country with Porch and Guardian Financial.
Is the inspector accepting a lesser amount?
Costs them $75.
So he is.
There's a cost.
Like a merchant fee.
It's a merchant fee of $75 to get paid at.
So the inspector's taking a $75 cut to get that service.
And passing that on to the client.
Yeah.
Well, you can pass on.
No, you
that.
can't. You
Yeah,
can't.
right, you don't have to, but it's something that you can add to,
I think
obviously, to your
What it's
inspection
coming
fee.
down to is you have to bill the title company that they're dealing with.
And that's a totally separate thing than what they're
It's
talking about.
separate than
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
What
it's
we and I are
separate.
talking about is the realtors are making you bill the title companies, and they tell you 3-4 months before you're gonna get paid, if you get paid or not. So you have to call the title company, verify that the money is there. That includes your dollar amount. And then the other part you get told is, honestly, is say you billed $340 for your inspection. Well, I paid $500 to the title company because that's what they said my inspection was. Title companies are keeping the money.
And a lot of title companies won't put it on there because they're like, you're not a part of this transaction. It isn't in the contract in any way, shape, or form.
So what?
And the whole big issue is that you never want to be an inspector to get paid at closing, because there's always going to be that perception or that possibility that the inspector holds off or doesn't put certain things in the report just to make sure that it actually closes so that he can actually get paid.
I mean,
and that's a huge risk.
But yes.
I mean, that's a huge risk.
It is and it isn't really, because you look at the house and then they close and then there's a complaint right behind it. It starts doing a
But I don't think they're getting a bunch of complaints that are linked to that. I mean,
if it's coming around that fast again, because we changed the rule in 2019, and it's coming back around, but it's coming back at a faster rate. And the inspectors are like, I've used the same realtor for so many years, and now I can't work with them because they went this way.
What rule was changed in 2019?
That we get paid 2 days after we get paid and then surrender the report.
That was, yeah. I mean, I remember doing it in the 90s, but it was just the way, no one paid with credit cards back then, so we were just doing pay at closing, but we never manipulated the report. I never felt that pressure to change the report. But
I do feel that
I see what you're saying, but what rule we put in place?
if you actually go back to the one that we're trying to amend, it says unless otherwise agreed in writing by the client. The realtor's out in, it's between the client and you.
But the client will never meet you unless the agent knows.
I don't think that's gonna do it, because the realtor, that's a client in that scenario.
And I think it's gonna be broker's responsibility and have it talk to class. And that make a big part about notifying the realtor.
Is there something that we can do as a committee to address this, or?
I mean,
Because I feel like there's rules already in place that the inspector manipulates the report, he's in violation of these rules.
So I guess part of my question is, with the rule in its current standing, if TREIC gets a complaint that, hey, I'm being told first off, if there's no transaction there, so how are you actually gonna do it? Because it's, well, this agent is telling me I have to, I have to be able to get paid at closing. I mean, how do they file a complaint on it? And if they file a complaint on that, is the rule sufficient to say that that is a violation?
I think what we would try to look at is any wrongful conduct. Like Sean said, there's already a rule that if they do something wrong, we can take disciplinary action against them. I'm looking at the language here. It says, an inspector shall not inspect a property when any compensation or future referrals depend on reported findings or on the closing or settlement of a property. So I'm looking at that depend. So the agreement that the inspector has with the client to begin this transaction to inspect the property doesn't depend on certain findings. In fact, that contract, I would assume, requires the client to pay regardless of whether the transaction closes or not.
Completely agree.
And
My concern is not the findings, it's the closing or settlement, because they're saying we aren't going to pay you then, they're going to pay you at closing.
Now, the issue we have had, like you said, went back to the fact that inspectors were getting burned when they agreed to that. So we never had an issue with them getting paid. The problem is that they weren't getting paid, and they said, hey, do I still have to give the report? And the way the rule was written at the time is, yes, you have to give the report within a certain amount of time.
Right.
So there was no way around that rule, so then that rule got changed. So I think we would have to find evidence that the compensation depended on particular findings. So we have to find some wrongful conduct.
But see, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the findings. The findings are not my issue. I think the findings are the end result if this actually happens. My concern is that you have brokers and agents telling inspectors that if you do not accept payment at closing, we're just not going to refer you. And they're saying that it's not violating the rule because it isn't dependent on closing. Because if you have an agreement with your client that you're gonna get paid, even if it doesn't close, well, you'll just have to go after them after the fact separately.
Well, then the Rule 222 applies. Then they should have it in writing.
You would have to have it in your agreement.
They're otherwise agreeing
You're not gonna
to get paid.
require payment until closing.
So if we go to this rule saying whether it has to be with the client, then the realtor, my whole thing goes back to broker's responsibility, realtors, that they need to be educated that this is actually in place and it's a violation unless the client, because the realtors are telling them to make one check to the title company and that includes your inspection. That's the whole thing right there is.
But I don't know how we would regulate, because realtors threaten to not use inspectors for all kinds of reasons, and I don't know how we would place rules. I mean, I know there's rules that say you can't purchase your way onto the list.
The problem, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the problem I would see it if the inspector, when they're reaching that agreement with the client, they specifically say, all right, you know what, if it closes, you pay me, and if it doesn't close, then you don't have to pay me. Now that right there would be a violation, because then they're making their payment dependent on whether the property closes or not. But that's not what's happening. They're getting burned and they want to get paid, and the problem is that now they have to file a civil suit for payment.
Because you put in your agreement that I'll get paid at closing, and if there is no closing, now you have no agreement of when you get paid.
And see, therein lies part of my problem, is if you're saying I get paid at closing, and I know I'll get paid and I don't have to go through the civil stuff if it closes.
Yeah.
So now there's a motivation on the inspector side to make sure that it closes.
Because you agreed up front, I'll get paid at closing, you get there and the house needs to be demoed, and you're like, this thing will never close if I tell them what it is exactly here, but. And I see that, I mean, I made that decision to go
but that's-
prepayment when my
But
receivable.
that's already
Already can't do
that's
that.
already addressed by the rules, like, I don't know how we
Yeah,
compel it
it's kind of
to
hard,
make it any stronger.
because there'll never even be a transaction between that inspector
Right.
and client if the, their representative told them,
Right, don't
here's,
use them.
here are the inspectors that'll pay at closing, here's the ones that want it up front.
So what do you, here's a question to Lee, like what, I know you brought this up, do you have thoughts? Is it to prohibit payment at closing?
Ideally, I would like that, but I just see this rule as having a loophole. And I see this loophole being used, so that they're trying to force the inspector to
But
get
the
paid.
loophole is the threat from the broker? That's what I'm struggling with.
Of lack of no referrals. I mean, I've seen it where they've made it very clear, well, if you don't accept payment at closing, then you'll never
But
get it.
how is that a loophole in the rule?
Because they're saying that it's not a rule violation, because it's not dependent on the closing or settlement of the property. Because they're saying that if you have an agreement with the client to get paid at closing, even if it doesn't close, you can go after them civilly. So now it's setting up either you write the report in such a way that you hope it actually closes, or you have to go through and do this civil litigation to get paid.
Your agreement.
You're gonna spend more time in trying to get the civil litigation.
I think the only way to do it is either prevent it from, because I don't think you can tell the agents officially in a rule saying you cannot direct your clients, blah, blah, blah.
I agree.
But, so the only other way to do it is address it like you said, ultimately, is remove the pay at closing rule and propose as a rule.
See, it's not in the negative. So if the agent threatens you with that, I'm not gonna refer more people, there's a tenuous argument. But if the inspector says, all right, I'll make it close, but you need to refer me people. So that's more, affirmative.
Understand that as well. Yep.
So the other is, I see your point. It's more tenuous argument. We would have to have a little bit more evidence to prove a violation.
I just see a long-term risk to the consumer that an inspector could be swayed to word something differently to give it the best chance of closing so that they get paid.
There's certainly that, and we do have an enforcement mechanism if some findings are manipulated. Again, we would have to be able to prove it, and if they did, then we should have evidence.
That's the hard part, is proving that, they could just word something just nicer. There's any number of ways to butter bread on something like that. It's just.
Don't we have the tool in place for when that happens? If there's a complaint filed, we've got a rule that says you can't do that.
And we do.
I'm not saying it's not hard to prove, it's not, I'm not saying that, I don't know what the solution is if it's not what we have.
Because it's when you're talking about inspectors won't complain against sales agents and brokers, I get that, but this would not be a complaint from an inspector, so it'd be a complaint from the client saying, I got this report that says everything's great and it's not great, what happened? Then they would have to look at it and determine, why was this reported this way and determine if it was in that condition or not. So the complaints that we should be getting are not from the inspectors or from the sales agents, it should be from clients saying, we're getting shoddy reports that aren't agreeing with the condition of the house. We're not seeing those, are we?
But we're getting.
That's never gonna come back to this, that's just gonna come back to what the inspector found or didn't find.
We are getting complaints, because that's what the buyers,
right,
but it doesn't relate back to that other issue, whether, because they manipulated to make it close. They're gonna complain, just like they do now, because something wasn't put out there, so that complaint is gonna come in. So, this other issue would be like a secondary or an additional issue that we'd have to look at to see, not only were they negligent, now was there some intentional misconduct? So that kind of raises the intent.
Other than what we currently have on the books, the only other option really is to look at adding a rule so that we cannot accept compensation at closing Is that basically where
Yeah, I
the
think
decision
that's-
point we're at is
But we should
the
be
committee?
able to accept it anytime we want.
I think that's where, I think that's the only like place that, you know, we can see where that would land.
Is it committee?
You know, sometimes you have an agent who's working with a client that can't afford anything,
Right.
and they want you to hold off on billing until closing.
Yeah.
And everything comes out of escrow,
Mhm.
and it's rolled into their loan. You don't have much choice either to do it or not. So, that comes into play,
That would be a written agreement between the client and you,
absolutely.
if it was addressed that way. But if your standard practice is to go directly to closing,
Yeah,
that's different.
that's.
I see what you're saying, I agree with that.
And the inspection order agreement should say how you're gonna get paid.
I think the only way we can address it as a committee is to say this is not allowed any longer. Say it closing, because there's no way to put out a directive from our committee to say to the real estate agents, you gotta stop doing this.
Yeah, if the circuit.
Other than just pull like bulletins and stuff. So I don't,
If you do say at closing, put a date in there too.
I mean, I understand what Lee's saying, but I'm personally not willing to move on a motion to rule against that, because
I understand.
I've done that early in my career and I didn't have any issues with it.
I don't
You know,
see
like
it happening in my area, but it does sound like it's, like a lot of things, geographical, it spreads like a little virus.
Yeah.
To address the issue with the fact that they get complaints about inspector reports not coming in, what if there was just an extra question that you ask an inspector as part of that process, when were you paid?
The enforcement process.
In the enforcement process. So if it's determined that they're paid at closing, then enforcement could look a little further into it to determine if there was any sort of quid pro quo.
If nothing else, we start collecting data to see how many
Yeah.
complaints are tied to the transaction like this.
Just a thought, that could be some,
Yeah.
you know, kind
Because
of
that's,
a
that would open
stopgap.
up a book and keep going.
Then we know if it's really a big issue or not.
I understand we're complaint driven, and that's what, part of what hinders us in this one. I see this as being a risk to the consumer of, you know, doing an inspection and, ooh, how do I want to word this? Because I really need to make sure this closes.
Well, in the past, we've gotten into positions where we're walking that line about making recommendations on the inspector's ability to contract, and that always goes badly, and understandably so. You know,
I do like that have enforcement ask, how do they get paid? When do they get paid?
Or if they were even paid at closing.
Then just,
It could be as simple as just saying that, was this transaction paid at closing or prior?
Well, I mean, if it's necessary, we do send out a letter whenever a complaint is filed against an inspector, asking them to provide, you know, a response to the allegations, but typically it pertains to the specific allegations being made against the inspector. If the payment is not an issue, we don't have a reason to ask about that. Sometimes it is. Sometimes we've had some cases, and then that's the issue that we go after.
You're collecting a lot of dates. That could just be one of the dates. When did you make contact? When did you do the inspection? When did you get the report?
Well,
When did you get paid?
My opinion, we rely on the inspection report itself, because that inspection report has that information.
Yeah.
So, you know, if the inspector has to get paid, you know, before the inspection or after the inspection, maybe we should add a line to the inspection report. That way we know on all inspection reports when they get paid, before, after. I mean, it's kind of the same situation.
Mine's on the report anyway. Paid this amount, paid via this method, but.
Could we, as part of like, you know, sort of preliminary data gathering, take this approach of, you know, ask this question, see what we're seeing? Because I don't doubt that I mean, I have no doubt, but it's what's our approach to looking at it, and data collection seems to be, even just at this level, a little bit of the.
Yeah, what if we get data back that says out of 70% of the complaints we get were by inspectors who were paid at closing?
Yeah.
Then maybe there's a correlation, you never know.
We can certainly add to the letter anything that we want to. And typically, typically the inspectors will respond. So we just have to ask that specific question. Here's the problem. The problem, let's say we ask the inspector to provide specific information, now they're required to provide it. If they don't provide that information within 14 days, then we can take disciplinary action against them for not answering that question. I mean, it's just how it goes.
So, I mean, it sounds like something we can do is collect.
We can ask a question.
Yeah, just
as
ask
to
the
the letter.
Yeah, we can work on that internally, and get
Okay.
it, we'll get it
Start
nuanced
collecting
the way
data.
we want.
Yeah.
See which way it's going.
Yeah, we should have to figure out
That's
how
a good solution.
to do it, maybe process it.
We start collecting it.
We have different routes. We have an investigator, and then we have an HQ. So HQ is the letters that we sent. The investigator would have to ask that question separately during that investigation, so we'd have to kind of set up the mechanism.
Yeah, so I think internally we can meet, get Mike, figure out what is that really gonna look like? And if it's, I mean, Mike may come up with some reason why, this is absurd, why'd you guys come up with this idea? Who knows, but we will take the direction of the committee to start looking into the possibility of collecting that data as it relates to the date, and bring it back to you.
Okay. All right. Anything else? What?
I'm out.
You have a meeting or something?
No, wait, hold on.
I have now a question. Does it ever happen where you do an inspection for somebody who is about to sell their house and uses your inspection to do remediation?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Pre-listing inspections, yep.
I would have thought so.
Yeah. Doesn't happen too often. Some of them do, some of them don't, because sometimes the seller's disclosure notice has a question in there. Have you had an inspection done in the last 4 or 5 years, depending on whose form you use? And if you just include that inspection report without having the benefit of the inspector giving you the walkthrough and saying, here's what's going on, the factual representation of everything that's technically wrong with the house sometimes can be very overwhelming to a buyer and could actually throw them off because it makes the house sound a lot worse than it actually is. So that's usually one of the deterrents for pre-listing inspections. I think they have value, absolutely, but I can understand why lots of others don't.
All right. Item 12, discussion of possible actions, 535, Abby.
That is me, the moment everyone's been waiting for, I'm sure. So I think we talked about quadrennial rule last meeting. My plan here is just today take about 60 seconds unless there are any questions, and just go over some of the highlights. So just as a refresh, quadrennial rule review is something that all state agencies have to go through. It's kind of like spring cleaning for rules. You go through, you make sure that terminology is consistent, nothing's outdated, that kind of thing. And so for the most part, in fact, all of these changes that I think that you were sent are non-substantive. It's, making sure that any references to administrator are changed to executive director, things like that. But there are a couple things I just wanted to highlight for you, and then of course, if you have any questions, please let me know. But the first chunk that I wanted to talk about are just dealing with some of the education rules where we made some changes just to reflect the combination of legal and ethics and the standards of practice review course. So you'll see some rule changes to that effect. So that's in 535.63, 0.72, 0.214, and 0.218. The next sections I wanted to talk about, you'll see there's a couple sections where large chunks have been repealed. So it looks like it's a substantive change, but these are actually the sections like 535.209, 212, 213, where large chunks have actually expired. If you recall, 212 was replaced by 214, so there's just a lot of language that's outdated now and actually says it's already expired, so we're taking that out. 535.213, we made this same change in the real estate qualifying course content rule. So we talked about this with ESAC. It's something that looks substantive, but it really is not. It's duplicative language that exists in the course content forms as well. So the idea is to try to streamline the rule and just keep that language in the form, but not have it also duplicative in the rules to make it a little easier to read. It doesn't change the rule process. Any change in the form would still have to go through the rulemaking process. But we just thought it was a little clearer, yes, Tom.
And any sort of changes you guys would want to make to those courses moving forward, you can do. This doesn't change your authority to do that. It just takes it out of the rule and has it on the course form.
Yeah.
That's where those changes.
No change to the process at all. It's just, again, trying to streamline the rule and make it a little easier to read. So, and recognizing that most folks look at the course content forms anyway. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention is 218C. There's a section removed there. It's duplicative. It's already in 535.72. And so we just took it out there. Right below that, D1 was removed to account for a scenario where the inspector renews after their expiration date, so that late renewal concept. So that was pretty fast, but if there's any questions, if you have them later even, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to address anything. And the idea would be that these would go forward at the August with your blessing.
The most of the heavy lifting on inspector rules happened over the education process and SFPs, so there's not a whole lot of.
Yeah, these are, unless you're spotting anything, I think in staff's opinion, these are all non-substantive changes, so there shouldn't be anything that you're just like, oh gosh, what is happening? But if there is, please let us know.
We need a motion on this. Motion to move this forward. Scott?
Second.
Lee, second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Item number 13, request for future meeting agenda items.
Nope, Denise has something.
Oh.
Yeah, hi, for the record, Denise Sample, Director of Licensing, and I wanted to just bring up, I didn't include it as part of my report, but Sean Emmerich and I have been talking late last week about the possibility of creating a new termination of inspector sponsorship form because we've been encountering some confusion and some questions about how exactly does a professional inspector terminate sponsorship of a real estate inspector or an apprentice. And so it's kind of one of those things we just discovered that we never created a form for that process similar to what we have on the real estate side. And so my plan would be to draft a new form that would mirror the termination of sponsorship for a sales agent form that we currently have on our website and present it at the next committee meeting in October for your review and approval, possible approval.
It's proposed. Yeah. So if you're removing, yeah, so I've had a few issues with removing people I've sponsored who no longer employed by me, so I talked to Denise. There is a form present, but it just needs probably, like she was saying, just some clarification or something that mirrors the form that the brokers use to remove real estate agents. So it's just a simple form that the sponsoring inspector can send in to remove the apprentice that they're sponsoring. So we'll have that on the agenda for next month.
I've got an item as well. October will be the last time we meet before the November commission meeting, and so probably want to talk about any potential legislative, the inspector legislative stuff, just to briefly go over
that. Then item number 10, subcommittee meeting is going to work on that, so bring something back, have that on the agenda. Any other?
We can report back.
You're going to report back on the.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we would have data collected, right? But we'll let you know what that conversation looked like.
We're also going to bring back, is it I'm sorry, that is two, that is that. 223 was the.
60.
Yeah,
we'll look at
60 is the, I'm sorry, that would be problem.
All right. Discussion and possible action regarding future meeting dates. So the suggested date for next meeting is October 17th, 10 a.m.
Actually, can't be 17th.
can't do the
Can
17th.
do the 18th or the 19th.
What about Tuesday the 18th? Does that work for everybody else?
Either one of those.
Yeah, you good with that? Tuesday the 18th, October. Okay. All right. 18th then.
The Tuesday meeting.
Yes.
Brian looks like he's good.
Okay.
I'm good with the 18th, October.
10 o'clock?
Do we want to set on the January? Yes, 10 o'clock. Do we want to set on the January dates?
Up to you.
January 17th work for everybody? It's my wife's birthday, so okay to come off, but my wife's birthday.
I'll let you make that.
Bring her with you.
The 16th is an okay day.
Okay.
January?
Yeah.
Is it 16th, the holiday?
Yeah.
Martin Luther King Day. So you want
Okay,
on the
but
first day of a 4-day short week. Got nothing better to do.
Yeah, I want to do what does the 18th look like for everybody?
The Wednesday.
Yeah, we'll just start skipping down those Monday, Tuesday.
I'm good with Tuesday. I mean, if we're gonna, if it's gonna be a short week anyway, I'd rather
Everybody
have
good with
3
Tuesday?
days at the last.
It's like a Monday, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Tuesday the 17th, 10 a.m. I'll just tell my wife. Happy birthday. It's your birthday?
Today?
Yeah.
Oh, happy birthday.
Okay.
21?
22.
That's why he wore the special shirt. That's why he wore the.
That's why he wore the happy shirt.
Steve's birthday shirt.
He's supposed to sing too. All right.
We'll wait till everybody leaves.
All right. That's all we have. We can adjourn at
11:42.
Thanks, everybody.
Got out 30 minutes in advance.
Thank you, Brian.
Good seeing everyone. Bye, guys.
This is